Hello, ninth graders. I hope you all had a great spring break, and we're back at it with phase 2 of our distance learning. Remember that yesterday, Wednesday, you were supposed to have completed the explication assignment, and then you had to upload the typed document into Turnitin. So you should have already done that before you start listening to this video, okay? So make sure you got that completed. So what you were doing is you were trying your hand at explicating, which is what we've been doing to all of the poems that we've done thus far, okay? And so it was just a chance for you to see how well you have mastered the skill of explication of poetry. It's to give you a chance to practice. We do have our poetry test coming up at the end of this unit on Friday the 24th. And so we've got a little while. We've got more practice coming. But you need to kind of start honing those skills and making sure that you definitely understand the process and how to do it. So the first thing that I asked you to do was to read the poem a couple of times. I'm going to read it out to you real quick, okay? It's one of my favorite poems. It's A Poison Tree by William Blake. And whenever I was fussing with some of my friends when I was in middle school, you know how middle school is, my mom gave me this poem. She was a college professor at Mercer, and told me to read it, and, you know, the moral of the story was to talk things out. So I've always liked it ever since then. So it is called A Poison Tree, and it's by William Blake. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not. My wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears. And I sunned it with smiles and with soft deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. So the first thing that I asked you to do was to go through and define any unfamiliar words. Diction in poetry, which is a poet's choice of words, is incredibly important. There's an economy of words in poetry. It's unlike prose, which would be like an essay or a chapter or a story or a novel, where an author can write on and on and on to express themselves. Poems are usually fairly short, and so the words they're choosing are important. So you can't just sort of skim past one that you don't really know and figure like, well, I got the gist of it. Any words that you're not sure of, or that you feel like they may be using an unfamiliar, use of that word, you need to look up. So if you looked them up, wrath means, of course, anger or fury. Foe is an enemy. Deceitful means trying to trick somebody or in some way be deceptive, to fool them. Bore, as it's used here, means to produce. Beheld means saw, basically. He looked at it. And then veiled means hidden. Okay? So hopefully you got those written down. So what we're going to do now is go back to the start of the assignment. Okay? And so I did ask you to make sure and read it carefully a couple of times and sort of interact with it as you went. And then you were supposed to write down your first impression of what the poem is about. So just whatever, after your first reading, going through it a couple of times, whatever you thought it was about, that's what I wanted you to put there. So then we were going to go through and do a paraphrase. So when you're explicating a poem, the first thing you want to do is determine meaning. What does the poem mean? And the best way to do that is going through and sort of putting it into plain language, not necessarily line by line. Sometimes you have to kind of go from punctuation to punctuation or whatever, however it expresses a complete thought. I did that for you so that you knew which sentence, which lines you were looking at. So lines 1 through 2, I gave you an example. It says he was angry with his friend, but he told him about his anger, and that made his anger go away, probably because he talked it out, right? So the next lines, I was angry with my foe, I told it not, my wrath did grow. So on that one, when you're writing right here, basically, when he got angry with his friend, he told him about it, like, hey man, you hurt my feelings, or whatever, and they talked about it and they got over it because they cleared the air. But when he got angry at his enemy, he didn't talk about it. You know, because it's his enemy. He doesn't like him anyway. And so his anger then didn't go away. You know, it's not going to go away totally on its own. It didn't go away, and instead it started to grow. Okay? So let's go back to the poem. So that's what it's talking about here, where he says, I was angry with my foe, I told it not, my wrath did grow. So since he didn't talk about it with his foe, it just kept growing. So Dale, what did you think he meant when he said, and I watered it in fears night and morning with my tears? Basically, what you've got here is he's using a metaphor of the anger that he has being like a plant, right? Or as we find out later on, a tree. And so he's watering it, he's nurturing that anger, and it's growing. Okay, so he's watering it in fears night and morning with his tears. So every time he cries over being upset, it's just making that anger, again, the metaphor here is the plant or the tree being his anger, is growing. And he says he suns it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. Oh, I probably should have put wiles on there for words for you to look up. If you took it upon yourself to look up that unfamiliar word, good on you. That's exactly what you should have done. So when he's saying he's sunning it, again, we're still in that metaphor, just like you would use water and sun to grow a plant. He's sunning it, metaphorically speaking, with smiles. So why would he be smiling if he's angry? Well, he's probably smiling either at the thought of his enemy's destruction, or smiling maybe thinking about how he's going to get back at him, or, you know, not a happy smile, I don't think. And then he's sunning it not only with his smiles, but with soft, deceitful wiles. So, like, you remember Wile E. Coyote? He's always trying to come up with plans, like nefarious schemes. So that's what he's doing here, these schemes that he's coming up with. Oh, and so then in the next part where it says, and it grew, again, that's this metaphor that we've got. This anger that's like a plant or a tree. It grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright. So have you ever heard the expression about something bearing fruit? You know, they talk about it can be emotions, or it can be a plan, or it can be something you're working towards, and they talk about, you know, whether or not it's going to bear fruit. In other words, is it going to produce? And so his anger did produce something, okay? It produced an apple. And so you got to kind of think, okay, metaphorically, what would that apple be? Well, obviously it was something that the foe wanted, because he says that his enemy beheld it shine. So he saw it, he looked at it, and it was shiny and pretty, and he knew that it was mine, and so that made his enemy want it. You know, that made the enemy desire it. So it ends by saying, and into my garden stole when the night had veiled the pole. So he creeps into the garden at night, right? And then it ends, in the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. So you got to, at that point, circle back around to what's the title here, a poison tree. You know, so I don't think his foe is outstretched sound asleep. Do you? The insinuation there is that his foe is dead. So that's basically that part, or whoops. That's basically this part of, you know, filling in the rest of those lines. That's what we just went through and did. Okay? So now let's concentrate on the other questions. Come on, thing. Spread. Because you're not willing to do it. Come on. Okay. I don't think it's going to let me make it bigger here like I was trying to. Alright, so I think I can see it. So, question number 2 says, now that you've paraphrased the entire poem, did your idea of what the poem means stay the same, or did it change? So remember, I had asked you to write down what you thought the poem meant from the beginning. What I'm really asking here is, did the paraphrase process help you to understand the poem? Hopefully the answer is yes. It should have. Looking up those unfamiliar words, breaking it down piece by piece, and sort of figuring out what exactly is the poet saying here, all of that should have helped you to feel like, oh, okay, I think I understand what he's saying now. The next question is, why is this poem a good example of imagery? And Blake is really known for his imagery. And again, I think you got to tie that into, okay, that does, I got a new pen, but it's still not perfect. Okay, so there we go, that's a little bit better. The metaphor of his anger being like a tree, right? And so that's an image. You really get that image there of this tree growing, of this shiny apple, of his enemy creeping into the garden. So it's a really, Blake is known for his imagery, for really putting pictures in your mind. When I teach this poem with my seniors, with my Britlet, I actually have them go through and storyboard the poem, because you literally can draw it out frame by frame, because it's so clear what he's saying is happening. Okay, so then next, I told you to write out the rhyme scheme of the poem. So we're going to actually write it here on the poem. So let me erase that part right there so we can get to it. And let's go through and try to do rhyme scheme. So remember that for rhyme scheme, you're just assigning each of the sounds at the end of the line a letter. Okay, so friend would be A. End, does that rhyme with it? Yes, it does. Friend, end. So that's also going to be A. Foe, okay, that's a different sound. So we go to the next letter of the alphabet, B. Grow, that rhymes with foe, so that's B. Fears, C. Tears, C. Smiles, D. Wiles, D. Night, another new sound, E. Bright, E. Shine, another new sound, that's F. Mine, F. Stole, that's going to be another new sound. Check back up at the other ones, make sure, because sometimes they will circle back, but that's another new sound. Pole, G, and then C and tree, H, H. Okay? So, the rhyme scheme that you should have written down on that part of your sheet, let's get back to it right here, is A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, etc. And basically what that means is we've got a series of rhyming couplets. Remember us talking about couplets before? We've done that in some of our other poems. It's where you have two lines right next to each other in a poem that rhyme. Okay, so that's what we have here. And then meter, okay, if we look at the meter, that's when you're going to count out the actual syllables, right? So you can clap that out, or I usually tap it out with my fingers. So I was angry with my friend. Okay, how many was that? Did you count 2? That was 7. I told my wrath did end. Okay, that was 8. I was angry with my foe. Once again, that was 7. I told it not, my wrath did grow. Wait, I did that wrong. I told it not, my wrath did grow. Okay, 8 again. So you've got 7, 8, 7, 8. And I watered it in fears. 7. Night and morning with my tears. 7. And I sunned it with smiles. I think he might have meant sunned there to be 2. And I sunned it with smiles. Yeah, I think he meant that to be 2. So 7. And with soft deceitful wiles. 7. And it grew both day and night. 7. Till it bore an apple bright. 7. And my foe beheld it shine. 7. And he knew that it was mine. 7. And into my garden stole. 7. When the night had veiled the pole. 7. In the morning glad I see. 7. My foe outstretched beneath the tree. 8. So, most of them are 7 syllables all throughout. So it has a very steady meter, right? A very steady tempo and meter. You do have a few that come in at 8 syllables, but most of them are coming in at 7, okay? So, what I ask in that next question there is, what is the effect of that? The sound of the rhyme scheme, the couplets, and the meter. what kind of tone does it imply? And we've talked about this in some of our other poems. When you have rhyming couplets, and particularly if you have a very steady meter, it really keeps the poem kind of rocking along. You know, it makes it feel upbeat and up-tempo, right? It moves along quickly. Normally, we expect that to be a very happy and cheerful type of poem. That's what happens quite often with that kind of rhyme scheme and tempo. However, in this situation, does the implied tone match the actual subject matter of the poem? Well, no, there's a murder that happens, you know, so it sounds like it's this rollicking little happy tune, but then you get to the end of it and he's killed a man, you know. So I think that Blake did that intentionally, that sort of juxtaposition between this sort of very upbeat series of rhyming couplets with a steady meter and tempo, but then the speaker is actually killing somebody by the end of it. So I think that he did that purposefully in order to sort of put some extra tension into the poem. And then the last one I asked, do you think there's a moral or a theme to the poem, and if so, what is it? Well, it kind of goes back to what we talked about here at the beginning, right? That very first stanza. If you're angry and you talk it out, what happens? That anger goes away. But if you're angry and you just sit on it and let it grow and grow and grow, then it's going to end in destruction. And one of the interesting things to think about, and so basically the theme then would be, you need to talk out your feelings, right? And not sit on them and let them fester. Because it could bear fruit. It could produce something that could be harmful to you or someone else. And that's kind of an interesting way to end with talking about this poem is, who got harmed in this poem? Who's the victims here? Who actually suffered? Well, obviously the foe did, because by the end of the poem he is dead. But so did the speaker, right? I mean, think about it. That's all he was consumed with throughout. He's just, thinking about his anger, letting it grow, letting it fester. That's going over and over and over. That's all he's doing. And then at the end, he becomes a murderer and is happy about it. He's glad to see his foe stretched outside the tree. It's really creepy when you think about it, right? So I think there definitely is a moral or a theme, and that you need to talk stuff out. And just a little moment to tell you, as we're going through all of this stuff, it is so crazy. It's crazy for the adults around you as well as for you at the stage of life you're at. So if you need to talk, reach out to somebody. Don't let stuff fester, okay? All right, I hope that helps you understand the poem. If you still have any questions or anything, just holler at me. Not literally, just shoot me an email and I'll help you as best I can. Remember that you need to review and study for the vocab quiz today, because you are having the vocab quiz tomorrow. And I don't know in what format yet, but more information will be coming as soon as I get that figured out. Okay? Take care.